My name is Jessica Carter. I'm 36 years old, and my 8-year-old daughter Lily is the reason I get up every morning. We live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Denver, Colorado. 3 years ago, my husband, Adam Carter, was killed in a car accident. Our lives changed forever that day. Lily was only 5 years old. She adored her father. After he died, she stopped laughing the way she used to. Every night before bed, she would place his photograph under her pillow. Whenever her teacher asked the class to draw their family, Lily always drew 3 people: herself, me, and her dad watching from the clouds. Watching her grieve broke my heart, but I had to stay strong, not for myself, for her. I worked at a small children's bookstore in downtown Denver. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to keep our little home and give Lily the childhood she deserved. About a year after Adam's death, I met Daniel Brooks. We met at a community fundraising event. Daniel was charming, kind, patient. He listened more than he talked. He remembered birthdays. He opened doors. He made everyone around him feel important. Most importantly, Lily liked him immediately. He never tried to replace her father. Instead, he told her, "I'm not here to be your dad, Lily. But if you ever need another friend, I'll always be here." Those words melted my heart. For the first time since losing Adam, I allowed myself to imagine a future again. As our relationship became more serious, Daniel slowly became part of our routine, especially on Fridays. Every Friday evening, I had to stay late at the bookstore to complete inventory. Daniel offered to pick Lily up from school. He'd take her for ice cream. Sometimes they'd stop at the park. Then he'd bring her home before I finished work. Lily always seemed happy. At least, that's what I believed. Everything changed on a Friday afternoon. It was parent-teacher conference day. Lily's teacher, Mrs. Rebecca Collins, greeted me with a warm smile. "Lily is one of the brightest students in my class," she said. "She's creative, polite, and incredibly thoughtful." I smiled proudly. "Thank you." But my smile faded. Mrs. Collins folded her hands together. "I've noticed something during the past few weeks." "What is it?" "Every Friday afternoon, Lily becomes anxious." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She keeps looking out the classroom window. She asks what time it is every few minutes. And when the final bell rings, she doesn't seem excited to leave." I immediately thought of Adam. Maybe she's still grieving her father. Mrs. Collins hesitated. I considered that. But then something else happened. She opened a folder and placed several drawings on the desk. One picture showed a little girl standing beside a black SUV. A tall man waited inside the vehicle. His face had been colored completely black. In the corner of the drawing was a large red door. Outside the door stood Lily. Inside the house, another little girl was crying. A chill ran down my spine. "What does this mean?" Mrs. Collins slowly shook her head. I asked Lily. What did she say? She called it the secret house. The room suddenly felt much colder. I forced myself to stay calm. "Mrs. Collins, are you trying to tell me something?" She looked toward the classroom door to make sure no one was nearby. Then she quietly stood, walked around her desk, and leaned closer to me in a voice barely louder than a whisper. She said, "Please don't leave Lily alone with the man who picks her up on Fridays." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "Daniel," she nodded slowly, "I can't prove anything. But children often tell us the truth, without realizing they're telling us." I felt my heart racing. "Why are you saying this?" Mrs. Collins looked down at Lily's latest drawing. "Last Friday, Lily told me something that frightened me." "What did she say?" Mrs. Collins took a deep breath, then quietly repeated Lily's exact words. "Daniel says one day we're going somewhere far away, but Mommy can never know." Everything around me seemed to disappear. The classroom, the desks, the voices in the hallway. Only those words remained. Mommy can never know. I grabbed my purse and hurried into the hallway. The school clock read 4:17 p.m. Daniel had picked Lily up only 17 minutes earlier. My hands trembled as I called him, straight to voicemail. I called again. His phone was turned off. A wave of panic rushed through me. Then I remembered. Lily wore a children's GPS safety watch. With shaking fingers, I opened the tracking app on my phone. A small blue dot appeared. They were moving, but not toward our house. Daniel's SUV was heading north on Interstate 25, away from Denver, away from home, away from everything familiar. I immediately dialed 911. "My name is Jessica Carter. I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I think my daughter has been taken, the dispatcher asked calmly. Who has your daughter? I looked once more at the moving GPS signal. My boyfriend. And I think he's taking her somewhere she'll never come back from. Outside the school windows, dark clouds were gathering over the Rocky Mountains. And somewhere on that highway, my little girl was riding away with a man. I suddenly realized I might never have truly known. The 911 dispatcher stayed on the line while I stared at the blinking GPS signal on my phone. The blue dot was moving steadily north on Interstate 25. It wasn't heading toward our neighborhood. It wasn't heading toward the ice cream shop Daniel usually took Lily to. It was leaving Denver. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the dispatcher's voice. Ma'am, officers have been notified. Stay where you are. I can't, I said. My daughter is in that car. Mrs. Rebecca Collins gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Go, she whispered. We'll handle everything here. I ran to my car. By the time I started the engine, 2 police cruisers had already pulled into the school parking lot. One of the officers introduced himself. Detective Mark Reynolds, Denver Police Department. He glanced at the GPS screen. He's moving fast. I nodded. He always takes Lily home. Never this direction. The detective looked at me seriously. Then we're treating this as a possible child abduction. Those words nearly knocked the breath out of me. As we drove north, dispatch continued tracking Daniel's vehicle through Lily's GPS watch. For nearly 30 minutes, the signal stayed active. Then it suddenly stopped. The blue dot froze near a small gas station outside Fort Collins. Did they stop? I asked. Detective Reynolds frowned. Maybe. Or maybe he knows she's wearing a tracker. We arrived at the gas station 20 minutes later. Several patrol cars were already there. An officer walked toward us, carrying something in a clear evidence bag. It was Lily's pink GPS watch. The strap had been cut with a knife. I covered my mouth to stop myself from crying. Beside the watch lay a folded napkin. Detective Reynolds carefully unfolded it. Written in blue crayon were 5 simple words. Mom, I left a clue. Tears streamed down my face. Even while she was terrified, my little girl had been trying to help us find her. Security cameras from the gas station showed Daniel changing vehicles. He abandoned his black SUV behind the building. A gray cargo van pulled into the parking lot minutes later. Daniel transferred several bags into the van. Lily stood beside him. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was watching, thinking, waiting. As Daniel loaded the last suitcase, Lily quietly dropped the napkin onto the ground. She knew someone would find it. Detective Reynolds looked at the video again. She's incredibly brave, I whispered. She's just like her father. The investigation moved quickly. Police searched Daniel's apartment in Denver. What they found changed everything. The apartment was almost empty. Most of the furniture had already been removed. Closets were bare. Kitchen cabinets were cleaned out. Whoever Daniel really was, he had been planning to disappear. Inside a locked filing cabinet, detectives found folders labeled with names. Not business files, not tax records, women's names, single mothers from Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. Each folder contained photographs, addresses, work schedules, school information, children's names. My folder was the thickest. It included copies of my driver's license, property records, my work schedule, even Lily's weekly school timetable. Detective Reynolds slowly closed the folder. He didn't choose you by accident. He studied your life. I felt physically sick. Why me? Because predators look for opportunity. You were a widowed mother. You worked long hours. You trusted him. Later that afternoon, the FBI joined the investigation. Because there was evidence Daniel intended to cross state lines with Lily, the case became federal. Special Agent Rachel Monroe arrived from the Denver field office. She carried a thick file. We finally identified your boyfriend. I looked at her. His name isn't Daniel Brooks. It never was. She opened the file. A mugshot stared back at me. The man looked older. His hair was shorter, but there was no mistaking those eyes. His real name is Nathan Cole. The room became silent. Agent Monroe continued. Nathan has used at least 7 different identities over the past 12 years. He's wanted in multiple states for identity fraud, kidnapping, document forgery, and financial crimes. I struggled to breathe. The man I loved never existed. There was something even worse. 6 years earlier, Nathan had nearly succeeded in taking another child, his own daughter. The FBI arranged a phone call with his former wife, Amanda Cole. Her voice trembled as she spoke. If Nathan has Lily, he's already convinced himself she's his child now. I frowned. What do you mean? He creates a fantasy. He changes their names. He tells them their mothers abandoned them. He tries to build a completely new life. I felt my stomach turn. Amanda took a deep breath. He won't hurt Lily. At least, not physically. But he'll spend every day trying to erase you from her memory. That evening, detectives searched Nathan's abandoned SUV. Inside, they discovered a child's backpack. It wasn't Lily's. It contained new clothes, a passport application, a birth certificate. The child's name was listed as Lucy Brooks. The photograph attached to the paperwork wasn't Lucy. It was Lily. Nathan had already created a new identity for my daughter. Agent Monroe quietly looked at me. He wasn't taking her on a trip. He was planning to disappear forever. As investigators continued searching the vehicle, Detective Reynolds noticed something tucked inside the backpack. A folded drawing. He carefully opened it. It was another picture Lily had made. It showed 3 mountains, a river, a tiny cabin, and, in the corner, she had written 2 characters, B-17. No one understood what it meant until my phone rang. It was Mrs. Collins. I think I know what Lily was trying to tell us, she said. Yesterday, our class studied maps of the Rocky Mountains. There was one location she kept asking questions about. What location? I asked desperately. Mrs. Collins answered immediately. Cabin B-17. It's an old ranger station near the Wyoming border. Detective Reynolds grabbed the map. Agent Monroe was already calling tactical teams. If Lily had left another clue, she wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was leading us to her, but none of us knew whether we would reach her before Nathan realized exactly what she was doing. Within minutes, a convoy of police vehicles was racing toward the Wyoming border. Detective Mark Reynolds drove while FBI Special Agent Rachel Monroe coordinated with local law enforcement over the radio. I sat in the back seat, clutching Lily's drawing so tightly that the paper had begun to wrinkle. The words, Cabin B-17, echoed over and over in my mind. Please let us get there in time. Please let my little girl still be there. After nearly 2 hours on the road, we entered a remote stretch of forest managed by the U.S. Forest Service. The ranger station confirmed that Cabin B-17 had been abandoned for years. Very few people even knew it existed. That made it the perfect hiding place. Police officers surrounded the area while a drone flew overhead. Everyone held their breath. Then the drone operator spoke. I see a gray cargo van. My heart nearly stopped. It matches the description. The cabin was hidden between tall pine trees. Smoke drifted from the chimney. Someone was inside. The tactical team moved quietly through the woods. Detective Reynolds turned toward me. Jessica, you need to stay behind the police line. I nodded, but every instinct told me to run to my daughter. A few minutes later, an officer carefully looked through one of the cabin windows. He whispered into his radio. I have visual. 1 adult male, 1 young female. Lily appears unharmed. Tears filled my eyes. She was alive. Inside the cabin, Nathan was helping Lily unpack new clothes. Through binoculars, we watched him kneel beside her. He smiled. From a distance, it almost looked like a caring father talking to his daughter, but we all knew the truth. He wasn't trying to protect her, he was trying to steal her life. Agent Monroe listened through a directional microphone. Nathan's voice came through clearly. From now on, your name is Lucy. Lily quietly shook her head. My name is Lily. Nathan smiled again. No? Your old life is over. You don't need your mother anymore. I covered my mouth to stop myself from crying. Lily looked down at the floor. Then she softly answered, My mommy will find me. Nathan laughed. She doesn't even know where you are. None of us realized. Lily was already proving him wrong. About 20 minutes later, Nathan stepped outside to fill a gasoline container. He left Lily alone inside the cabin. Detective Reynolds whispered, This may be our only chance. But before the tactical team could move, something unexpected happened. Lily walked to the cabin window. She looked directly toward the trees, toward us. For one terrifying second, I thought she had seen the officers. Instead, she slowly lifted her hand and pointed toward the back door. Agent Monroe immediately understood. She's telling us he left it unlocked. Detective Reynolds smiled. That little girl is incredible. The rescue operation began. 2 officers quietly moved toward the rear entrance. Another team surrounded the front. Everything depended on perfect timing. Just as the rear officers reached the door, Nathan turned around. He saw movement in the trees. His face changed instantly. "Police!" He ran toward the cabin. Before anyone could stop him, he slammed the front door shut and locked it. "Lily!" he shouted. "Come here!" Inside, furniture crashed against the floor. The tactical commander spoke calmly through a loudspeaker. "Nathan Cole! The cabin is surrounded. Come out with your hands up!" Nathan screamed back, "She's my daughter. You'll never take her away." Seconds felt like hours. Then, a small figure appeared at the back door. It was Lily. She had quietly unlocked it from the inside. One officer pulled the door open. "Lily!" She ran as fast as she could, straight into the officer's arms, the moment I saw her. I couldn't stop myself. I broke past the police line. "Lily!" She looked up. "Mommy!" She jumped into my arms. I held her so tightly I thought I would never let go again. She buried her face against my shoulder. "I knew you'd find me." I kissed the top of her head over and over. "I'll always find you, no matter what." Inside the cabin, Nathan refused to surrender. He barricaded himself behind heavy furniture. Negotiators spoke with him for nearly an hour. Finally, Detective Reynolds tried one last time. "Nathan, it's over." There was a long silence. Then Nathan quietly replied, "No. I already lost once. I'm not losing another daughter." Agent Monroe looked at me. He truly believes his own lies. Moments later, officers heard breaking glass. Nathan had climbed through a side window and was trying to escape into the forest. He didn't get far. Within minutes, police officers tackled him to the ground. As they placed him in handcuffs, he looked directly at me. "You turned her against me." I stared back without fear. "You never loved her. You only wanted to control her." Nathan said nothing. For the first time, he had no lies left. As paramedics checked Lily for injuries, Detective Reynolds handed me something they had found inside the cabin. It was a small notebook. Every page had been filled with Lily's drawings, maps, trees, road signs, mountains, tiny arrows pointing north. Every picture was another clue. She hadn't been drawing to pass the time. She had been leaving a trail for us. At the bottom of the last page, she had written one simple sentence in careful handwriting. "Mom always says brave people never stop hoping." I couldn't hold back my tears. My little girl had remembered my words, even when she was terrified. As we prepared to return home, Agent Monroe received a phone call. She listened silently for a few seconds. Then her expression changed. She looked at Detective Reynolds. "We have another problem." "What is it?" he asked. Agent Monroe slowly lowered the phone. "The search of Nathan's storage unit just uncovered files on 3 more single mothers, and one of them disappeared yesterday." The nightmare wasn't over yet. When we returned to Denver, I thought the nightmare was finally over. I was wrong. The FBI's investigation had uncovered something much bigger than a single kidnapping. Nathan Cole hadn't chosen me by chance. He had spent years studying vulnerable families, widowed mothers, single mothers, women who worked long hours, women raising children alone. His storage unit contained dozens of carefully organized files, photographs, school schedules, home addresses, medical records, even handwritten notes describing each family's daily routine. I stared at the evidence table in disbelief. "How many families?" I asked. Agent Rachel Monroe looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "We've identified 23. 23. I couldn't imagine how many lives he had secretly watched before he chose mine. One red folder caught Detective Reynolds' attention. Across the front, someone had written, "Next." Inside was a file about another little girl. Her name was Emma Wilson. She was 9 years old. She lived with her mother in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Just like Lily. Emma's father had died several years earlier. My stomach turned. "Is she safe?" Agent Monroe didn't answer immediately. Then she quietly said, "We don't know." Emma had disappeared the previous afternoon. Her mother believed she had simply walked to a friend's house. No one had connected the case to Nathan, until now. Within minutes, the FBI contacted Wyoming authorities. An Amber Alert was issued. Nathan finally realized he couldn't escape the evidence against him. During questioning, he remained silent for hours. Then, Detective Reynolds placed Lily's notebook on the table. Nathan stared at the drawings, the maps, the arrows, the clues. He realized that an 8-year-old girl had outsmarted him. For the first time, his confidence disappeared. He lowered his head. Then he quietly asked, "Is Lily okay?" Detective Reynolds answered firmly, "She's home." Nathan closed his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt her." The detective leaned forward. "You stole her from her mother. You gave her a fake name. You planned to erase her entire life." Nathan whispered, "I thought she'd be happier." Detective Reynolds shook his head. "No. You wanted control. That's not love." Nathan didn't argue, because deep down, he knew it was true. 3 days later, the FBI located Emma Wilson. She had been hidden in an abandoned motel outside Billings, Montana. Nathan hadn't taken her, but someone else had. The investigation revealed Nathan had been communicating with another predator through encrypted messages. The information found in his storage unit led investigators directly to that man. Emma was rescued safely. When Agent Monroe called to tell me the news, I burst into tears. Lily wasn't the only child who had been saved. Her courage had helped save another little girl hundreds of miles away. Several months later, Nathan Cole stood before a federal judge. The courtroom was completely silent. Families from several states filled the gallery. Many of them had been victims. Some had lost money. Others had lost years of peace. Some had nearly lost their children. The judge looked directly at Nathan. "You carefully targeted women who had already experienced unimaginable loss. You manipulated their trust. You attempted to destroy families for your own selfish fantasies." He paused. "Your crimes were calculated. They were deliberate. And they caused lasting trauma to innocent children." Nathan was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As deputies escorted him from the courtroom, he turned toward me one last time. For a moment, our eyes met. Then he looked away. He never spoke another word. Life slowly returned to normal. Lily started smiling again. She laughed with her friends. She rode her bicycle through our neighborhood. Little by little, the fear began to fade. She still attended counseling every week, but each visit made her stronger. One evening, while we planted new flowers in our garden, she looked up at me. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think Daddy helped you find me?" Tears filled my eyes. I smiled gently. "I think your daddy never stopped watching over you." Lily smiled back. "I think so too." At the end of the school year, I visited Mrs. Rebecca Collins. She was organizing books in her classroom when I knocked on the door. She smiled. "Jessica, Lily looks wonderful." "She's doing so much better." I nodded. "Because of you." Mrs. Collins shook her head. "I only listened." "No," I replied. "You did something much harder. You spoke." I handed her a small gift box. Inside was a silver necklace with a single word engraved on the pendant. Courage. She looked at it quietly before tears filled her eyes. "I'll treasure this forever." A few weeks later, Lily was asked to speak at a school assembly about courage. She stood on the stage holding a small piece of paper. The entire auditorium was silent. She smiled nervously and said, "My teacher listened when I was too scared to ask for help. My mom believed me, and the police never gave up." She looked toward Mrs. Collins. "One sentence can save a life." Many people in the audience wiped away tears. I was one of them. Today, whenever people ask how our story ended, I always tell them the same thing. It didn't end the day my daughter came home. It ended the day we stopped being afraid. Because evil often depends on silence, but courage begins the moment someone decides to speak. One caring teacher noticed a frightened little girl. She trusted her instincts. She whispered one simple sentence, a sentence that exposed a dangerous criminal, saved my daughter, protected another innocent child, and reminded me that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they stand at the front of a classroom with a piece of chalk in their hand and quietly change someone's life forever.